folks, I'm Chef Tiffany and I'm very excited today because we get to do one of my personal favorite recipes. And not just because it's so delicious and tasty, which it is, it's actually good for you and it's something that can really wow any guests that you have at your house. So I'm excited that you will actually use this one in the future. It's got a few moving parts though. So one of the most important things that I've been taught in cooking, at the Cordon Bleu in Paris, they said very few things in English, but one thing that they would always hit home is that you absolutely have to have beautiful, fresh products that are seasonal. And when we do things like this, like there's certain dishes you're not going to want to prepare all year. You're also going to want to be able to prepare something that can help you make something else. The most important thing you can do with any recipe is getting all of your ingredients prepped and ready before you start. This is called mise en place, everything in its place. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to start with the pineapple because it's probably one of the harder things to manipulate in this recipe. You're going to take a pineapple, literally cut it in half, and then the core of the pineapple is going to be right here. Okay, so you really want to cut out that core first, and the reason is because it's tough. And you really don't want that in the recipe as far as something you're going to be eating. So let's get this out of here. And you kind of cut here, and then cut kind of sideways to ensure that this part really gets out. But you don't want to waste everything else around here. Is still really good pineapple. Now, what we're doing is basically creating a bowl. So you're going to go ahead and core this out. Now this is still really good pineapple. You do not want to get rid of that because we're going to use that still as part of this recipe. But we're coring this out to make it a bowl. And a lot of times the wow factor of this dish actually is the fact that it comes in a real pineapple. So this is kind of a sweet and savory dish, and you're probably going to hear the term all the time when you're watching Food Network and all this stuff. And they talk about fusion foods. Well, pretty much everything these days. I always hate when people ask, do you have traditional Mexican food at Aunt Chilada's? Well, no, because traditional Mexican food is a lot of filler products. We have 100% scratch kitchen, and we don't try to use cheap fillers. But now we've got our pineapple, and we're gonna set that aside because we're gonna need to grill it in just a few. So one of the biggest part of cooking is really saving time. When you're doing things, you want to cut things right. You want to save yourself some time, save yourself some headaches. So this recipe happens to call for diced onions. You can use white or red, completely up to you. I'm going to show you, just because this one's already whole, I'm going to show you how to make really easy diced onions, okay? You're going to cut the onion in half. And the critical part of this is that you keep the base. So you have to keep this part because that's literally what's holding everything together. We're going to obviously remove the first, or the skin and the first layer, and then you take this and see, this is already being held together, so it's not going to fall apart on you. Now you're going to take your knife, cut off that end, and then you're going to cut slits through this way, and then you're going to cut slits this way, okay? And then you're going to cut here. And look, instead of having to take all that time to dice and make your eyes water and cry, you want to make sure that you have a really sharp knife. And this is going to be for our cilantro and onion mix. Alrighty, so I've got my onions over here. And because my cilantro is my only herb that I'm using in this, I'm actually going to wait to cut this until the very end because you really don't want herbs to oxidize. Then the recipe calls for bell peppers. This is kind of one of those things where it can be at your liberty. I definitely prefer to use both just because it gives it a little bit more color, a little bit more flavor. Capsicums are so good for you. Especially in the time of COVID, everybody's talking about lung health and things of that nature. Well, this is one of nature's way of fighting any sort of lung disease. So these are really, really good for you. And we're going to take a mixture. You notice that I'm removing the pith. See that pith? And the seeds. I'm taking all of that out. And then this part's a little bit tough to chop. So we're actually going to flip it around. And don't be worried if you get a few seeds in there. That's absolutely fine. But I'm going to chop some of this down, and we're just making one shrimp today, so we don't need too incredibly many of these little chops, but we are going to chop this into little bits, and we're going to do the same with our green pepper. And again, I'm flipping this over, making sure all that pith is out of there. I'll put some of my peppers over here, and then just kind of chop these down as well, depending on how sharp your knife is. It's always really nice to keep a sharp knife because, one, it stops you from crying too much, and then the other is that you can move a whole lot quicker and you're a lot less likely to cut yourself. So I'm going to put some of these peppers over here. Now, I've got everything I need over here. I've got my peppers right here. I've got my onions. I'm going to keep clean as I go because one of the most important things you can do is keep a clean workstation. The pineapple that we've cored out, we're going to just chop into little bits like this. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and get my burner going. You really want to get this pretty high on heat. I'm going to be using a blend of things, but most right here, one thing that you can do with cilantro is kind of a little trick. You can rip off the tops. That way you're only going to have the sprigs. And we can go ahead and chop all this. You notice I'm curling my fingers. And then we can chop this. And then we're going to mix this right in with the onions. Now the onions that we've already used from the pineapple salsa, that's great. But what we have here is something that hasn't been cooked. So it's going to be a totally different flavor. And I hear little kids and people all the time, I don't like onions. Well, onions bring out the flavor of everything else. So it's really imperative that you do cook with them, even though some people might not like them in the raw. It is a really critical ingredient for a lot of things that we do. So I'm going to keep a clean workstation here. Put that over there in the rubbish. I've got all my ingredients that I need. I've got my pineapple salsa that we made. Hey guys, we are in the kitchen for this one because this one's a little bit more intricate. We're going to be making the pineapple salsa, and obviously we have 100% scratch kitchen, so we're going to start from the very beginning. We have this expression at the Cordon Bleu in Paris. They would say, you start with the crap, you end with the crap. And what that means is you always want to make sure you have the freshest product. So as you're going through your cilantro, you want to make sure, like, here's a little bit of a dead piece. We're going to take that out. We really don't want many of the stems, so we are going to pull a lot of those out. And then with cilantro, this is the kind of thing, always when you're cooking with herbs, you always want to use your herbs or cut your herbs last. So you notice before I have everything that the mise en place, everything in its place. So everything has to get prepared first, and then you begin assembly. So I've got my salt, my cornstarch, my pineapple, I've got all of my ingredients before I even start to do my cutting on the cilantro. And you always want to remember, I'm sure I've said this before, but you want to curve your hands. Because that way, if you do, you want to follow the curvature of the knife. Because that way, if you're ever cutting and you're trying to cut like something in a bunch like this or something elongated, you really don't want to ever cut off your finger. Because when you're cutting like this, you can cut off your fingertip. And if you actually curve it, they call it the claw. If you ever cut anything, you're just going to graze your knuckle. All right? So that's very important and knife safety. Even in the kitchen here at Aunt Chilada's, when we do our training, we make sure that people are trained how to cut properly, even if it's a slower process. Okay, so I'm going to take my cilantro, throw it in the blender, and you notice I am wearing gloves. When you're working with jalapenos, I'm only going to use about a half, but I'm chopping this. And you notice with the jalapeno, in here contains most of the heat, okay? So this is a pineapple salsa, but it's a sweet and savory. So I'm actually going to remove, this is called the pith. I'm going to remove the pith before I cut it, and you want to take that stem out. And then the reason I'm really wearing gloves is because I don't want to later touch my eyes with that jalapeno or anything else, because that can certainly carry over. So we're obviously blending this, so I don't need to go too crazy with detail on how we cut it. But I do want to get it down so I don't wear down the blades of my blender too fast. As you can assume, we get a lot of use out of these here, between this and blended margaritas. All right, so I'm going to add my salt and my pepper. And I've got a can of pineapple juice. And then I've got crushed pineapples. You know, if you only have the round ones or any way, shape, or form they come in, again, we're blending them anyway. So this is pretty nice though, because you get all that juice. Add it in here. And then we are going to blend away. Okay, so now that she's blended, we're gonna throw her into a pot. And the reason we actually need to heat the salsa is because we haven't added our thickener. There's multiple types of thickener that you can use. We're using cornstarch today. And so really we're just gonna take this, heat it up, bring it to a boil. Okay, so this is where we come over to the stove and we wanna heat this sauce. So once it comes to a boil, you can add your thickening agent and that's going to give the sauce its consistency and it's also going to make it so it's not so runny. Alrighty, so now that we've got that dialed in and it's been heated, this is the consistency we're looking for. And for good measure, of course, you're always gonna taste and taste. Delicious. And then I've just got these chunks of pineapple. And even this, if you have a hollowed out pineapple and you just want a little hors d'oeuvre for a party and little toothpicks, this is a great thing that you can do that's incredibly simple too. So I've got my caramelized and grilled base. So earlier in the prep, I showed you how we core out a pineapple. To me, one of the coolest things about cooking is always presentation. A lot of times, I'll never forget when I was in elementary school and my teacher told us that we had to pack all white in our lunches. And I had a white sandwich and white, everything in white. And everybody unpacked their lunches and she said, "What's wrong with this picture?" And we all said, "Gosh, we need color in our lunch because we need green vegetables, we need red bell peppers, we need things that are good for us." So even from a young age, we realized that visual when it comes to cooking is incredibly important. So we're gonna take this pineapple and just set it directly on the grill. We're gonna try to get cross marks. I don't know if you've ever, on steaks, like when you're cooking a steak, for example, how you get that cross mark is to do it one side, and then you're gonna take it, and once it's really marked, you're gonna turn it the other direction. And that way you get those cross marks that go all the way through it. The other thing you're probably gonna notice while you're grilling it is you're gonna start to get an aroma. It almost smells like pineapple upside down cake. I don't know, that's one of my favorite cakes. But pineapple upside down cake, when you start to smell it, see, it's just barely charred right there. But you can imagine as the time goes on, and that's that perfect X I was talking about. So we're just gonna go ahead and let this grill off. It's gonna take about 10 minutes, depending on how hot your grill is. I went to the Cordon Bleu in Paris. They never told us the temperature of anything. You cook something until it is done. We never had cook times. Everything is based upon you being able to touch it and know when it's finished. So I'm going to show you the exact caramelization that we're looking for this pineapple. All right, so really what we're looking for, the grand reveal, is some char marks here, and you can see it kind of smoking. You smell it, it smells like pineapple upside down cake because it's caramelized. So that's going to be your base. You're actually eating out of a caramelized pineapple bowl. I'm heating my stovetop over here. I'm gonna add, you can use oil, butter, whatever you have. Please just do not use margarine. As a matter of fact, in general, in life, if you have margarine in your house, throw it away. We wanna use real things, kind of like unnatural sweeteners, unless you really have a dietary issue with it. Real sugar is just the way to go. So here, I'm gonna be heating my pan. I've got these shrimp, so I'm gonna let that butter cook down a little bit. And then I'm just gonna take these shrimp and throw them on in. All right, and you do wanna think about cooking times. These peppers are gonna take a little bit longer to cook just because of the nature of them. They are a little bit harder. If you were gonna use jalapenos, kind of same thing, but if you ever do cook jalapenos in a pot like this, you wanna be really cautious that you don't, literally it's like spraying off mace if those seeds pop up. So it can be really dangerous for your eyes. I'm gonna add a little bit of that pineapple salsa. And then of course the natural pineapple that we cored out. And while we let this cook a little bit, oh, the smell, so good. This is one of those fusion food items. It's actually a sweet Thai chili. And we're using this in conjunction with our pineapple salsa. And it does give it just a completely different flavor from like a traditional shrimp cocktail or something like that. But it is going to be a little bit sweet, so this is a sweet and savory dish. We'll let this cook down just a little bit. Oh, that looks good. And then I'm going to add that fresh cilantro and onion. Again, you can use white or purple. Kind of depends on the flavor palette you like. I prefer purple, but white is obviously what you're always going to have in your home. And then just by looks, I think we could use a little bit more. And then we're going to let this cook down, and while we do that, just get rid of some of these bowls. And then I've got our presentation plate here, which is always really important. And then I'm just going to take some of these green onions and I'm going to cut them down just for garnish. So really I'm just kind of chopping off the ends and then just making little round portions. And that'll be a little bit of flavor and just a little bit of color. Oh, that smells so good. It's incredible. This is why this is one of my favorite dishes. All right. Alrighty, this texture looks perfect to me. That shrimp is really well cooked. Pour a little bit of this in here. Oh, look at that color. Look at that. Doesn't that just look delicious? Ah! All right, we have one more runaway shrimp, but that's not so bad. We're going to garnish her there at the end. And there you have it. Shrimp stuffed pineapple.